or different culture.
Here's I guess to answer your guys' question about the funk. I do think it is instructive if the people who are closer to it than we are clearly had a lot of the same questions about him that we did. They talked about firing him. Yeah. They wouldn't let him pick his own staff. That happened. So when you're saying does it do anything, does he get any credit for what they did at the end of the year? In my eyes, 100% he got a lot of credit because he went from, in my eyes, a legitimate detriment to them, a bad coach that was hurting them, to now I think he's pretty clearly a good coach. Do I think I would rather have him than any of those 13 names I listed? No. Do I think he's elite, which to me means one of the 5 or 6 best coaches? Absolutely not. And I don't even think if you put pencil to paper, you would have him as one of the 5 or 6 best. I think we give him the title because he's the defending Super Bowl champion and he has the great record.
Not just that. That's the thing. And it wasn't, I'd see it if he took over a team that was already good.
The Eagles
they won 4 games the year before he got there.
That's can I ask you a question?
With the same quarterback.
Do you think Andrew Luck took over a terrible team? They won 2 games the year before he got there, but they had been to the playoffs every single.
That's why I went into the 3-year thing. They had a 3-year span where they went 9-7, 9-7, 4-12.
Hold on, if we're going to really do it, and they had a 4-year span where they win the Super Bowl, the next year win a playoff game.
3 years after that, they didn't do anything.
No, well, they won a playoff game. They made both the 9 and 7 years they made the playoffs. One of the years they won a playoff game, right?
So why'd they only win 4 games before he got there?
Because I think that it all fell apart on him that year. But the idea that he took over this moribund franchise
nobody said that. I just said it was a team that won 4 games the year before.
Yeah, but
then 2 years later he had him in the Super Bowl.
So yes,
with a quarterback that people thought couldn't play in the NFL as a starter.
They won a Super Bowl 4 years before they hired him and 4 years after they hired him, right? That's what they did. Like, so they, with this.
No, but they had a different quarterback. The improvement of Jalen Hurts, which obviously Jalen gets a ton of credit for. But it is true, would you agree, that people question whether or not he could even be a franchise quarterback?
100%.
And Sirianni has to get some credit because there have been several offensive coordinators working with him, and Sirianni's the one constant. I'm just saying, like, at the end of the day, it is your accomplishments that matter in a lot of jobs. And this is one of them. And the dude accomplishes, so far he's accomplished a lot.
He's absolutely accomplished a lot, and you can't take it away from him. I still think there's a lot of coaches that not only do I think I would rather have, I think other people at this table would rather have, that don't have the accomplishments. That you just, like, you watch football every weekend, you're like, I think that they are more impactful and that I have more proof of concept of that they can work in multiple situations. And so
when did they start doing the tush push?
With him.
3 years ago.
Oh.
But that's a Jalen Hurts thing.
Yeah, but Jalen Hurts wasn't doing it before Sirianni.
Jalen Hurts wasn't the quarterback before Sirianni, bro.
But I'm saying, Jalen Hurts, has he done that his whole career?
No, I mean, if we're going to say Nick Sirianni.
I'm just saying he decided we're going to start running this play. And no one in the NFL has been able to stop it.
That's
to the point where they want to Wilt Chamberlain him.
Wilt Chamberlain
and change the rules.
They're not Wilt Chamberlain.
He came up with the play.
Who was
Jason Kelce? They kept rolling after Jason Kelce was retired.
Coach? I don't remember. We don't say they changed the rules to stick it to Wilt's coach. We say they changed the rules to stick it to Wilt.
But
this is a Jalen Hurts play. This is a Jalen Hurts play.
Really? Sirianni has nothing to do with it.
No, I'm not. Come on.
Why haven't all the other coaches decided, you know what, let's run this play?
Because they don't have Jalen Hurts.
They got Josh Allen, and they don't work. Does it work? Ask the Chiefs. When the Chiefs play up against Josh Allen, they mac him. When Jalen is in and Sirianni are doing it, they back up.
Sirianni's not doing it.
Sirianni is doing it.
So Sirianni's not doing it.
Yes, he is.
Hey, man, I'm saying you got to get it.
You can do it, guys, and they do it.
What are you
if you gonna rip it, and again, I'm not a Sirianni fan.
You clearly
you're gonna rip him.
Bro, when did I rip him?
I'm just stating facts.
When did I rip him?
You rip him since we started the show, since the dude's been a head coach.
Yes, and then I gave him his credit when they won the Super Bowl. But I am not going to. I did. I did. Check the
You
tape.
you
the day of the
grudgingly
show.
probably
Yes,
said,
begrudgingly.
okay, it's
It is
Sirianni.
begrudgingly. It is begrudgingly.
This is not just 1 year. This is 4 years of success,
Okay,
of incredible success.
Wait, okay.
Incredible.
Now I
and
am
he
gonna,
don't have Patrick
now,
Mahomes.
Hold on. Now
He don't have Patrick
Now I
Mahomes.
am going to push back for a second.
Here we go.
Fine.
So 4 years of incredible success. The first year, he had the exact year that you were saying was part of a downs.
No, but it was a 5-win improvement. So don't shift things up.
Hold on. Okay.
They went from 4 wins to 9.
So, right. They won the exact number of games and made the playoffs and lost in the first round the same way they did 2 years before he got there.
What about the year before they got there? Because I ain't playing these mixing things up. The year before they got there, why did Doug Peterson even get fired?
Because it all fell apart. It all fell apart.
Okay, who rebuilt it?
I do not think Nick Sirianni rebuilt it.
Really?
Really?
Really? Why are we paying head coaches?
I think some of
I mean,
them are
seriously,
great.
why are we
Hold on.
paying head coaches?
Let's do the same thing with pre and post Zach Taylor. Let's do that.
Well, he brought in a guy named Joe Burrow.
Okay, right.
Who's better than Jalen Hurts. People never question whether Joe Burrow could be a franchise quarterback.
No, I agree with that, Brew, and I think also what
it just ain't fair. You don't want to give the dude any credit for winning every single season.
It's not that I don't want to give him credit. I just think those 13 guys are better than him.
Fine, but you don't like his personality. You've said it yourself. You think he's a doofus, I think is the word of choice.
Yeah, but you know what? So I'll meet you halfway. As long as he's the defending Super Bowl champion, the doofus label is removed. He's clearly not a doofus. I was wrong about that. However, to have the whiplash of he probably should be fired to he's an elite head coach based off one season, that season where the quarterback took a leap, Saquon, which you called, had one of the greatest running back seasons ever, the defensive coordinator that he was not allowed to hire transformed the defense, and we're like, now he's a genius?
Nick, that's not fair because we've seen coaches fired that we knew weren't bad coaches. J.B. Bickerstaff could have won Coach of the Year, was fired.
Yeah.
Kevin in Cleveland, the name escapes me. I voted for him for Coach of the Year. The Cavs coach.
Oh, okay.
Fired.
Well,
all
the
right.
championship coaches got fired.
Championship coaches, coaches of the year have gotten fired.
Yeah, they got fired.
You know, so I thought Thibodeau, if they had.
Okay. I wanted to really isolate this clip because they actually legitimately fight. You know, like they're angry at each other going back and forth. Brou is heated and so is Nick. And I'd already unpacked this pretty deeply. I made a very long video, like 30 plus minutes or so. So I definitely recommend checking it out. And I'm not going to rehash all of those things again, but there were just a few things that I wanted to discuss, that I wanted to break down, that I thought, you know, is pretty interesting. One, it is just pretty funny to me that Nick now will start to praise Jalen Hurts and say, well, the quarterback took a leap or whatever. And it was like, bro, the entire season you said Jalen Hurts was the weak link. You said that he is the weakest link on this team, and that if they don't win, it'll be because of him. Like throughout the season, not just the Super Bowl. And now, like, and now you're saying, well, the quarterback took a leap. Like, again, this is what I said in my in a bunch of recent videos with the Philadelphia Eagles, that people who want to keep trying to explain away how the Eagles won, if they keep talking, they eventually out-talk themselves. And they end up saying things that they then are contradictory, because on 1 minute you're saying, oh, well, you know, these coordinators aren't like he's talking like Nick again in the beginning of the season talking about Fangio's not a good defensive coordinator. Now the defense was transformed because of Fangio is such an amazing coordinator. You know, Kellen Moore, Nick Wright went on and on and on about how bad Kellen Moore is and how he was bad with the Cowboys and how the offense was better without him, and then Justin Herbert, and now it's like Kellen Moore had that offense going great. Saquon Barkley won't be special. Now Saquon Barkley special. Jalen Hurts, like it just. And your opinions can evolve, but the problem is that they only evolved so much throughout the season, which is why you doubted them. Now that this team is so great, so special, and they dominate the Kansas City Chiefs, you're just like, well, Jalen Hurts, he's a top quarterback. He's great. He took a huge leap and this and that. And it's like, Jalen Hurts is the same quarterback that he's been. And now when you're saying Nick Sirianni that he should have been fired. No, you thought he should have been fired. The Philadelphia Eagles didn't fire him. Just because they decided to hire the coordinators, they obviously still trusted Nick Sirianni to be the head coach. They understand how to run a team. I think it's fair to say that the Philadelphia Eagles know how to run a team. I don't think anyone could doubt that, considering how great they've been. So if they were comfortable enough continuing with Nick Sirianni, then that's the answer right there. And Nick Sirianni fits this team. And like Nick said earlier, where he's like, would Sirianni be good in a different situation? And it's like, it does not matter. Like that, if we were trying to figure out, is Nick Sirianni one of the greatest coaches of all time, then it matters. We can have a discussion about it, which is why Andy Reid gets such a massive step forward because of what he was able to do with Philly, with a collection of quarterbacks, what he did with Alex Smith, what he did with the Kansas City Chiefs. It's the whole resume. And when we compare that to like a Bill Belichick, we can say Bill Belichick was only successful with the Patriots and Tom Brady. Like, so that makes sense. We're not having that conversation about Nick Sirianni right now. We're just not. And if this isn't even, the question isn't even the right question. I'm ready to call Nick Sirianni an elite head coach because that's not actually what they're arguing right now. They're pretty much arguing how much credit should Nick Sirianni actually get. And it is funny because you want to blame Nick Sirianni when things are going bad, but then you don't want to give him any credit for when things are going well. And that's interesting. And I think the coordinators, I praised Fangio nonstop. And I praised the team, the roster, Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie. Like, everybody deserves credit here, quite frankly. This team is not led by these singular, these singular forces like we see the Chiefs and Andy and Mahomes, Josh Allen and the Bills. Like, that's not who the Eagles are, which is why they've been able to consistently be great through the years, through literally multiple decades. This is now the third decade that the Philadelphia Eagles have been a top franchise in the NFL. And so with that logic, I understand why Nick Sirianni's contribution will be downplayed a bit, but you still have to give credit because there's this fantasy that you could just remove Jalen Hurts and this team still wins the Super Bowl, that you could remove Kellen Moore and this team wins the Super Bowl, that you could remove, like, they always want to kind of like remove some of these pieces, and it's just like, again, it just never really makes a lot of sense to me. And whether Sirianni was officially the guy who 100% invented the tush push or not, it was Sirianni who was like, we're making this a foundational aspect of our offense. And we are going to do this. We are going to practice this. We're going to put in the work. We're going to perfect it. And we are going to run it. We're going to be aggressive. And yeah, Nick Sirianni, he does not 100% control the offense. He does not 100% call the plays and the game plans and et cetera, but he's obviously majorly involved. And there's 2 points of this. The first one, unfortunately, I just do not remember. I remember talking about it in one of my videos, but I don't remember what game it was. But Kellen Moore called a play, and it was very similar to the Super Bowl, essentially, where there was a big play, and I think Saquon went off and ran for a touchdown, and Kellen Moore went running to Nick Sirianni and was like, there were like 2 kids, especially Kellen Moore, was like, oh my God. And it was very similar to what happened in the Super Bowl. And we got a front row seat with them being mic'd up and being able to see the back and forth that they have. Like, Sirianni's saying, call this play, do this. And they threw the dagger. And so again, like, did Kellen Moore officially call the play, right? Because, Fangio's like, Sirianni's like, just do it. We score here, game's over. Like, you can't underestimate some of this influence and the importance of when you do have a little bit more of a walk around coach. Like, Nick Sirianni is so locked in on the officiating and all the tiny little details and how to draw off sides when they are doing the tush push. Like, he's so dialed in to so many of these other things that the Ben Johnsons of the world and the ones who are really locked into play calling. Like, I had a whole video breaking this down actually months ago with Greg Olson talking about this, that when you have a coach like that of Nick Sirianni, they get to focus on so many other different things that you don't necessarily focus on when you are responsible for calling the plays, when you're responsible for some of the other aspects, for some of the real one-to-one conversations with your quarterback. Like we see Shanahan and Purdy, or whoever his quarterback is at the moment, and Andy Reid and Mahomes are always butt to butt and all of that. Like you see that, and that's incredibly valuable. Incredibly valuable. And if you forced me to pick what type of relationship do you want with your head coach, it would be that. But it doesn't mean that you still then take away like any of the great aspects that Sirianni brings to the table and all of the attention to detail. And you saw that in how the Philadelphia Eagles played. Look at all the playoff teams. Look at all the playoff teams. Look at the Chargers. Look at the Broncos. Look at the Ravens. Look at the Bills. Look at all of these other great teams, the Rams, etc., all the playoff teams. And ask yourself, which team was the most prepared out of all of them? Look beyond the skill. Look beyond the depth. Look beyond the highlight reel plays. Look beyond the really smart play calling and, oh, that was just a brilliant play call. Look beyond all of that. Which team ultimately was the most prepared and the most ready to play and get after it? It was without a shadow of a doubt. It's not even a question. The Philadelphia Eagles. That's Nick Sirianni. And if you can't give Nick Sirianni credit for that, well, then it's like, well, then you can't give him credit for anything. Then at that point, there really is. And it's just like, all right. Like that is Sirianni's job. And it is Sirianni's job to make sure that everyone just keeps going and going and going and is relentless. And that is how you get up to score 95 points. That is how you don't lose sight in like kind of a weird wonky game against the Packers in the playoff, first round. And how you have like kind of a close like snow game where Jalen Hurts might have been on something, after he kind of messed up his knee. Like that's how you remain, everyone stays focused. And how, the Commanders marched down the field, their opening drive, and their coach decided to say, we're going to kick a field goal. And what did Nick Sirianni do in the Super Bowl? In the Super Bowl. First drive, fourth down. Says, go for it. Jalen Hurts, let's get after it. That is Sirianni's call. If you think Sirianni's just like, oh, gee golly, Kellen, it's your offense, you pick and choose. We see that that's not the way how this is run. We see that it's collaborative. We see that. And he's like, do it. And that, I know that play didn't necessarily work out 100% for them because of the flag and whatnot. But like, dude, if you don't think that sends a message to the team and the belief of Jalen, I mean, like that play alone was crazy. I remember watching it and I was just like, I don't know. I don't got the courage to call this. And the Commanders didn't either. And they've been going for it on fourth down nonstop. And they said, oh, we're going to kick a field goal. And the reality is, and listen, the Eagles obviously ended up dominating the win. That could be the difference between winning and losing. If the Commanders end up putting up a touchdown there, kind of changes everything. You have the domino effect. You have the butterfly effect. Maybe now you call a different play offensively for the Eagles. They don't call that exact run play at that exact time. Jalen Hurts doesn't check into that run, whatever it is, and Saquon doesn't rip off a 60-yard run. Like, everything changes. Like, it's a domino effect. Everything changes. You guys watch enough Marvel movies, like, everything changes. So you just don't know. I'm not saying that they would have lost that game, so don't get too, crazy Eagles fans. But I'm just saying, like, games can change in a just a snap of the fingers, a blink of the eye. And, like, Nick Sirianni gets credit for that. Nick Sirianni managed the playoffs against the Rams, against the Packers, against the Commanders, against the Chiefs way better than Harbaugh did with the Ravens in any of the last few playoff runs. Way better than Sean McDermott and the Buffalo Bills in multiple playoff runs. I mean, like, better than the Chargers and Harbaugh. Better than, I'm trying to think of other coaches real fast, Dan Quinn and the Commanders. Dan Quinn had those teams ready to go, without a doubt. They were ready to win. They had believed, and I loved it, and I supported it. Against the Eagles, they got scared. They were going for it on fourth down, nonstop, left and right against the Bucks, against the Lions, even that first drive against the Eagles. And then they're like, okay, we did it as far as we could. Let's kick a field goal now. Nope, that was a mistake. That was a head coaching mistake. That's straight up. That was a head coaching mistake. Even if Cliff's like, all right, let's kick a field goal here, Dan could say, no, we got to go for it. This is what we got to do. I know this team. I'm a defensive guy. I know how great this defense is for the Philadelphia Eagles. I've been studying them. We got to get after it. I don't know how many chances we're going to get in the red zone. We got to get after it. They didn't do it. They kicked the field goal. Could have changed everything. Eagles were ready to play. Sirianni had them ready to play. All the players, especially after the Super Bowl, had nothing but endless heaps of praise for Nick Sirianni. And believe me, they're not doing it just for fun. They're not just doing it because they're trying to win like brownie points. Like, these aren't a bunch of kids here. These are grown men. They're fathers. They got their own kids. Like, they're not like, oh, see, guys, I told you Sirianni was good. Like, it's all authentic there. I mean, people were kind of saying A.J. Brown doesn't like Nick Sirianni, and then yet A.J. Brown is the one that's like, I'm holding the Gatorade to dump it on. Believe me, I've been with coaches who I didn't like, who I still won or had some success with. And like, I'm not going out of my way to be like buddy with them. I'm like, yeah, we won. I'm happy. I'm grateful for all this success stuff. But like, you guys can go do the Gatorade bath if you want. I'm chilling. I'm gonna stay over here. So like, these are authentic emotions here. There's one thing we know: these players don't fake emotions. Like, that's the truth. Especially in such a heightened moment of like winning the literal Super Bowl. That's where they're going to be the most vulnerable. That's where you got Becton just sitting like a child, a 9-foot, 400-pound child, just crying with tears. I mean, he's got like a grill in his mouth and just tears coming down his eyes, playing with, just feeling the confetti on the grass. Like, this, it doesn't get any more real and authentic and genuine than that. And so when you hear what these guys saying, it was, speaking of Becton, it was Sirianni's, decision to play him where he played him. It was, Sirianni. So, I don't know. You got to give Sirianni some credit. You got to give him a lot of credit. It's fair to say that you believe other coaches are better than Sirianni, but you can still do it in a way that still gives Sirianni his flowers. And my problem with even Nick coming up with his list is, again, I'm okay with you even, and I'm not saying I agree with this list, and I've already unpacked it, and so I don't want to do it again. I'm okay with you even saying all of these coaches are better, and including the smaller ones, the honorable mentions, so it's like 13. I'm okay with that. But you still have to do it in a way where you still then give Nick Sirianni plenty and plenty and plenty of credit. Plenty of credit. That's my problem with some of these conversations. It's like, all these coaches are better, and Nick Sirianni doesn't really deserve that much. And then you give the kind of generic, oh, he did pretty good. He did good. And it's like, no. That's when you gotta have to read between the lines here. And then you start playing the shell game. I mean, the Eagles wanted to fire him, and this, that. And right, the Eagles picked their own coordinators. Absolutely. And that is technically like a little X against the Sirianni great path or whatever. But then when you take it to the next level and say, they should have fired him, or they were going to fire him, but they didn't. They reached the conclusion, no, we're not going to do that. And it was the right decision. So it's like, but yeah, I do find this conversation fascinating, and I do find it philosophically fascinating, because I look at, Sirianni has a 48-20 record, and it's like 2 NFC East titles, 2 NFC titles, and one the Super Bowl. And it's like, I'm not the type of person to give that all to Sirianni. I'm just not. And I'm not the person to also just be like, yeah, he was just a benefit of being on a great team, or, coaching a great team. Like, it's a lot of these truths are together. You praise Sean McVay, and I think Sean McVay is a brilliant coach, and a top coach, an elite coach, and a special coach. He didn't win a Super Bowl until Matthew Stafford got there. So it's like this. These things are complicated. These things are complicated. It's just, I don't know. It's just not that not that straightforward always, as much as we want to. And it is funny that you look at a Dan Campbell, and like Dan Campbell had 2 awesome coordinators, who also then went on, and Ben Johnson, who Nick Wright thinks is amazing, and Aaron Glenn going to the Jets, and they have a stacked roster, and on and on and on and on and on. And Nick believes that Jared Goff is a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts. Just look at his, Mahomes Mountain and all of that. So he's got a better quarterback, a better roster, better coaching staff, and all of this. And it's just like, so then why aren't you hurting Dan Campbell at all for having all of those gifts? Like, I don't understand. That doesn't make sense. So you gotta be consistent. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about Nick, Wright, and Brou? They legitimately got heated. Like, they were angry with all of this. Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions. Let's get in some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're on our way to doing it. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.